Wanted to thank you guys for giving me maybe the most mature conversation I've ever had on the internet. To both people that agreed with me and people that disagreed with me. Very respectful all around. I'm really not used to that from the internet. But the truth is, I'm really the one that has some explaining to do, I think. And that's because the first video I did about AI, I feel fell a little bit short. I didn't really cover some other perspectives, and that's one thing I want to do today. I'm going to go ahead and put the link below for the first video, because I think you might want to watch that before you watch this one. Yep, AI's been doing some cool stuff. Watching the last video, if you felt like I was a corporate mouthpiece after that, I think I understand why. So when it comes to AI, I do not believe that generative AI is stealing people's work. But that doesn't mean that I think that nothing can go wrong with it. So first, let me start by saying that data theft and hacking is not okay. So any event where one of these companies or anyone creating an AI model goes into a system, steals the data off of it in order to train their AI model, that is just not okay. You can't say, well, it went through an AI, so the theft didn't count. It still counts as theft. So the hard part, I'd say, is when you have people that train AI on data that is publicly available, but maybe they didn't consent to it being used to train an AI model. Now, to me, this is kind of a problem because it implies that you need the author's consent to do each individual action that you could possibly imagine doing. While I can't predict what things will look like going forward with AI, I think I do feel pretty safe saying I'm not going to support any law or legislation that requires people to walk on eggshells anytime they get near anyone else's work. As a software engineer and a programmer, I just cannot see that being workable moving forward. We generally share work. We post our code that we worked hard on over days, weeks, sometimes months onto the internet for free for everyone to have. That being said, there are also programmers that are now having issues with this too. As an engineer, when I picture how an AI model is and what it means to the world, I see it just like I see this camera in front of me. That it's something that can observe reality, intake input, and create something unique with it. Well, why do I say that though? Cameras just show you what it saw, right? Not today. Honestly, today's cameras do almost as much work as you do when it comes to shooting. Take Instagram filters, for instance. Are you allowed to say that the photo of yourself is your work? If you use an Instagram filter, it really changes the way the photo looks and you don't have to do hardly any work. I think one thing that's easier to say though is that if you went to an art museum with a camera and used an Instagram filter on a picture you took of the Mona Lisa in the museum, you probably wouldn't be able to sell that as your own work without risking a copyright lawsuit. What's different about AI is that AI isn't actually recording the original work. It is simply taking what it sees, learning from it, and then creating on its own. So I think the thing that we have to decide here is, should that mean AI needs to be treated differently? Should this tool be seen as something that is more than just a tool and has potential to do things that we don't want it to do, and we need to treat anything with AI software on it differently legally than we do other technology? Now, as an engineer, I say no, we can't do that. It would be too taxing. Basically, what that would mean is anytime we put any kind of AI-related technology into any product, it has to fall under all of these restrictions. And that seems like it wouldn't be very easy to deal with. But I also realize that if we don't, there may be consequences. My view is that capitalism is a game. Like in a game, there are winners and losers. But also like a game, I believe that we should stop when someone gets hurt. And whether you're a software engineer or an artist or anyone that creates, I understand how you feel. I understand the feeling of these companies are just taking advantage of our work. this would not be possible. This AI training, this ChatGPT, Midjourney, music generation, none of it would be possible if it weren't for our work. But given that art needs to be seen, as artists, we're forced to put our work on public forums. And within those public forums, it can be accessed by people. People can listen to it and people can learn from it. They can also make their own things based off of it. But we knew that going in, didn't we? We knew that other people would be able to listen to our work if they bought our album or took a look at our picture, and they might actually be able to compete with us someday if they're inspired by it. That tends to not bother us as much. But how are we ever supposed to know about this new technology coming around that can take all of that work that's publicly available and then create on its own based on that? From a technical, scientific, factual viewpoint, we really don't have an argument here. You know, it could be just said, well, you should have predicted the new technology coming around. That is what makes winners and losers in capitalism, and you failed the test. After all, AI has been around for a long time, and you could have been keeping up with it. But does that mean that we just let thousands of creators be displaced in their careers because this new technology came around and they didn't think it would? And what would their alternative have been? For an artist, they just can't show their work in any forum that is publicly available. I don't see how they're really going to make things work that way. I don't have an answer to this question today, but I hope that it's just good enough to be thinking about it. Another comment I've been seeing, which I think has merit and I do agree with, is that yes, AI can indeed create work that would constitute copyright infringement. Now, the thing about this is it would do it in the same way, again, that a human does. And that's because two humans can come up with the same idea on their own without being influenced by one another. In fact, many times we think it happens because they had the same originating influence that was outside of both of them. Say they heard some jingle in the same advertisement on television, and then one of the two of them comes up with a work that is enough to constitute their own idea. And then a little bit later, somebody else on their own comes up with the same thing. That can constitute copyright infringement. Now, should it? Does that really make any sense? Is that fair that two people had the same inspiration and came up with the same idea off of it, but the person that did it a month earlier, they have all the rights, and the person that came up with it a month later gets none and has to pay all of their earnings to the first person? I don't know if that actually does make sense, but it is the law. So yes, AI has the same potential, but it's also already happened to humans. So another argument I've been hearing, which I don't think has as much merit, is I would call it the argument for the human soul. And that is to say that humans actually create things without any reference whatsoever. That a human can create something that they've never experienced. And there's some truth to this, right? But the truth is that AI is also capable in that same way. So a human, let's say you're a caveman walking around in the environment. So you can do novel things interacting with that environment and with influences from that environment. Take the invention of the wheel. Well, that inspiration could have come from seeing a pine cone roll down a hill. Anything that gives a human an idea from the natural world is fair game to that human, but it would also be fair game to AI. You could train AI on imagery and videos from the natural world so that it could then create its own imagery and videos from the natural world. Would anybody really want that? I don't know. But going back to the argument that humans are somehow different and our creative spark is not the same as what AI does, I think that that would need to be proven. Scientifically, there's nothing out there that suggests that humans are any more than a brain made of a neural net in control of a body that can intake information, modify it, be influenced and inspired by it, and then create based on what it knows. So how can I assert this fact? Well, it's pretty simple. The way that the technology works is that way. You know, this is something I've had the opportunity to review at times. It's something that really any of us can learn about right now. I will definitely relink the video from the last video that explains this technically below. Another thing I wanted to say in this video is if you are super worried about your job and AI taking it, I don't know if you should be that concerned. I think pretty much everyone and their dog has gone ahead and decided that AI is going to get better than it is today, and that just might not be true. In software and many other types of engineering, there is a thing called diminishing returns. And that is when you do something in such a way where you can get very close to the result you want, but you can never quite get there. The issue is that AI is very far away from actually being able to make things without any human interaction whatsoever, especially if you want those things to be up to human standards. And this underlying assumption that we have that it will get better and eventually be perfect or close enough to perfect may not turn out to be true. There are many in the industry that do not feel that it ever will be true. And you may have noticed with recent AI advancements, solving hallucination hasn't been on the list. So if you can't solve the hallucination problem, you can't make the system 100% or even close to 100% reliable. So what you get from that is that no matter what, you still need a human to interact with it. Now, the one worry that you could still have would be that the AI will be able to do it more quickly or allow you to do it more quickly, and therefore there will be less demand for people like you because you yourself and other people, your colleagues, can do more work. The thing about that is you have to ask yourself this question. If we can do more work, are we going to do the same amount of work with less people, or are we simply just going to do more? I don't know where you work. I don't know what kind of interactions that you see. I can say that in my career, I've rarely seen the situation we were like, all right, finally we can cut one more engineer. It's more like, holy cow, we have a huge backlog of stuff to do, and we would do almost anything short of hiring yet another person to get through that backlog. Now, is art like software? Well, I'm not really sure on that, but I know I have yet to have the problem of logging into YouTube Music or Spotify and being like, dang, there's too many good songs on here. So I want to implore you again, if you are an artist, please go check out these AI tools because there are still open niches within the art industry, in my opinion. I feel that way because I don't find very much art that really speaks to me. And when I do, I just wish there were more. AI gives us an excellent opportunity to find new niches that we can speak to, new things that we can do, and new ways that we can be appreciated. I will put some links below that have some of the generative AI algorithms that I recommend if you want to get started. The most important thing to me is that I think this needs to be an open conversation. I fear that this conversation is going to be had by lawyers and decided by lawyers. And really, that doesn't always lead to the best outcomes. So people like me, engineers, artists, anyone that has skin in the game to some degree, I think needs to be involved in this conversation. And honestly, I think we might be taking it a little bit too seriously. What would an artist compensation scheme look like? Because the argument that artists should be paid for the work that was used to train AI models might not be completely unfair. If we were just playing capitalism as it normally is, then the artists would just lose. But again, I don't think we should be playing capitalism all the way to the end when someone gets hurt. So at that, how should we let artists be compensated? Maybe artists moving forward could be protected without any legal involvement. If platforms such as Spotify, YouTube Music were willing to put clauses in their agreements that state that you cannot use what's available here to train an AI model, then that would allow the artist some recourse to at least try to go after these companies. Now, the more difficult part of that is how, let's say they did it anyway, how would you then go about proving it? You'd have to somehow find the 1 out of a million AI generated songs that actually is close enough to your work to be considered infringement. And then you'd also have to prove that there are damages that you could go after. Neither one of these seems like a likely way forward for a struggling artist. So I'm not sure that that can completely solve the problem. Now, AI itself, and this is just an idea of mine, may have the answer. So it is now possible for AI models to take input data that they were not actually trained on and factor that into their output. So in the future, if we had, again, I'm going to use music as an example, If you had what we already have, but then you had the ability to also upload your own work on top of it and then build upon that work, it's possible that that could be more seen as something completely covered under copyright. That is to say, maybe it would be easier to say, I, Mark Ensley, should not be able to upload Beyonce's newest album and then make modifications to it using AI and publish that as my own work. I think that's a much easier case to make, since at that point the data is actually stored in the system. But for Beyonce to do it, that should be perfectly okay. And then what you would end up with is, sure, certainly people can still make their own AI generated work, but they wouldn't be able to use it to build upon the work of others directly. And on the other side, people that have work out there will have the power to do that. So the artist that created the song or created the picture is the only one that can upload it back into the algorithm to make modifications. And in the end, what that would look like for the actual artist is, instead of just releasing one hit song or one awesome album, they actually release hundreds of songs, because 90% of them are AI remixes. Now, I feel for music, this could certainly have a market, because there are already people making good money remixing other people's songs. And for image-based art, just imagine that you're working for a company and they ask you to do a design for them. You could do an initial design and then use AI to actually create thousands of times the output and allow them to choose what they want to use where. Now, this is something that is already possible in image generation AI and not as doable in music generation currently, but it's certainly something that is within the realm of capability of AI, unlike possibly not hallucinating. Now, I want to go ahead and admit some of my bias here. I do work professionally as a software engineer, you know that. But beyond that, I generate AI works of art today. I have actually been creating my own AI generated songs and posting them up to Spotify and other music streaming platforms. Now, that is certainly a legal gray area, and I do potentially see a cease and desist order in my future, at which time I'd need to decide how to handle that. And even beyond that, I use AI today in my day-to-day work. Copyright infringement isn't the only concern about generative AI today. There's also concerns about misinformation, and I get why we're all so concerned about that. So basically, the question is this: what is stopping someone from using AI to make it look like someone has said something that they did not say? That person might be an important person, and you may not really live in a situation where you feel you need to heed the words of an important person, but even if you don't, there are people that do. And this is not something that has been getting worse only due to AI. In fact, up to this point, AI has really not had much of a role to play. You may remember a few years ago when Twitter had a few of its, say, power users like Barack Obama and Elon Musk doing Bitcoin scams. Now, that turned out to be because of a technology known as impersonation that allows admins to use users' accounts in order to troubleshoot. And that's a story for a different day. So of course you could already spread misinformation before AI, and even though AI has been generating some things that could be seen as misinformation, I don't think anyone is really going to buy them at face value. If AI ever does get to the point where it can fool us at face value, then there may be some momentary panics when it comes to this stuff. And I don't see any way out of that today. Anything that you were to legislate, yeah, the people that would do something like that probably don't care what the law is, and they're just going to do it anyway. Now, it could be refuted rather quickly in most cases that the person that put out the content, or everybody thinks put out the content, could simply, get on social media, get on the internet and say, yeah, that wasn't me at all. This is fake. And I think that would probably serve to backfire against whoever did it in the first place. And the truth is, beyond all this, we're already in a pretty bad place when it comes to misinformation. There's already a huge swath of the population that can be fooled with things that people have generated and put on websites without AI's help at all. And that's to say, sure, someone could use AI to help them put together a conspiracy theory website about how the earth is flat, or how some politician did something that they didn't actually do. The most interesting thing about AI is that a lot of the issues it raises were already issues before any of this started. Misinformation is one example, but then let's go back to copyright. Copyright is an issue without AI existing. And I can say that because I'm a small creator. When I was in college, I ran a separate YouTube channel other than just this one, and it was a little bit more political. In that YouTube channel, I used a clip from a show called Full Frontal with Samantha Bee, and I'm not going to do anything like that this time because when I did it in that channel, I was copyright claimed. And it demonetized my video, it made it harder for me to get people to view it, and basically killed it dead at the time where it should have been getting viewership. So I had no recourse other than to challenge it, and those challenges take a long time. Even if I were to win, I would not recoup any ad revenue. Not to say I was really making that much in the first place, but when you have a strike like that on you, you really can't make anything. What really bugged me about the whole thing is the show Full Frontal with Samantha Bee, the one that was copyright claiming me for a fair use, was a show itself that does a lot of that fair use, where it takes clips from channels like CNN and then comments on them, makes jokes about them, which is exactly what I was doing in my video. Now, I don't want to show any of that because I'm still on the wrong side of the power dynamic. I can still get crushed. So one thing I hope for is that AI will serve as an opportunity for us to fix the copyright system. What you're seeing with it right now is that the haves within the system are upset. So now attention is being paid. When the have-nots, the small people like myself, were complaining, nobody was willing to do anything. And this is a big problem that exists in the Western world as a whole, that when someone has money, they have the ability to enact change, and therefore the system works for them. Those that don't have money can't enact that change when they need to, and therefore can never become part of that system. This goes directly against competitive principles that we tend to have in capitalism in the Western world. Yet it is the way things are. And it sometimes takes a disruptive technology like AI to come in and knock the walls down. Overall though, guys, I really like how this conversation is starting. I feel like I'm getting a lot of opinions, both agreeing with me and disagreeing with me rationally. And that is more than I can say I'm used to on the internet. So please, guys, keep it up. If you want to keep this conversation going, please put your thoughts in that comment box below. I want to hear how you feel about this issue. Have a good night.